One of the biggest negatives of the probates is that people get really mad at you. The reality is that there's not always a correlation between the condition of somebody's house and whether they are willing to consider a cash offer. None of these lists are going to be magic, and you've got to figure out your communication strategy and become an expert in the list. Welcome back to Agent Investor. Agent Investor is the only brand that helps real estate agents get off the real estate roller coaster. We help real estate agents specifically focus their business on sellers to generate face-to-face seller appointments, hopefully some that will be motivated to sell cash, some that will end up listing with you, and so that you can get fix and flip opportunities to either do yourself or partner with us on, so that you can get big chunks of income that you can invest in long-term passive assets that pay you forever. That, by the way, is what we call the agent investor model. It is a model that I followed, and then a lot of people that I've either worked with or seen nationwide have followed. It is the easiest way for a real estate agent to achieve financial freedom, build up wealth, get off the real estate roller coaster, etc. We show agents how to generate face-to-face seller appointments. We even provide agents with face-to-face seller appointments if you are on our seller team. We've been talking for the past few weeks. If you are just tuning in to our deal finding series, this is probably episode 5 or 6. We've already done 4 or 5 episodes on how to find these deals. By the way, when I say find the deals, I mean generate face-to-face seller appointments, of which roughly 20% are going to take the cash offer, right? So when you market and you say, hey, let me make an offer on your home, almost everybody's going to say, yeah, come in my house, make me an offer. We'll see what you can do. If it's a good offer, or if it's an offer that works for me, I will sell my property to you. But we know statistics show that only 20% of all sellers that you meet with that you make a cash offer are going to take it for a variety of different reasons, which means if you are an agent and you are marketing with a cash offer call to action, that means that 80% of those appointments are going to be sellers who are thinking or considering selling their property, but need more money, need to hit the market, and you are going to generate a ton of great listing opportunities. So the deal finding series is all about giving you guys kind of a sneak peek behind the curtain of the kind of stuff that we do, my team, that generates between 100 and 130 appointments per week. Pretty much like clockwork, every single week we are in over 100 sellers' homes. So I'm going to talk today about a different strategy. Today, I'm going to be talking about using lists to generate seller appointments and ultimately cash deals. Now, again, if you have not listened to any of these episodes in the past few weeks, you can go back in time, obviously on Apple and Spotify, whatever, platform that you listen on, and you can listen to the prior episodes. Each of those episodes has a different way to generate seller appointments. What I want to impress upon you is that you want to pick one of these to start, become an expert in one. And for most agents, if you're just generating 1 or 2 or 3 seller appointments a week, that's going to change your business. That's really all that most agents need to follow the agent investor model, to get a ton of listings, focus their retail business on sellers, generate cash offer deals, fix and flip some properties, get big chunks of income, and invest them into passive assets. So go back in time to those episodes if you want to listen to some of these other strategies, but pick one. So today, again, I'm going to talk about lists, because this is one of maybe the most frequent question I get from agents or even non-agents that are looking to find deals. And the question kind of goes something like this. Hey, Tom, want to generate some deals. Who should I be reaching out to? Should I be targeting people that are about to get foreclosed on, or probates or divorces or expireds or high equity, or should I be driving all around town and looking for beat up properties? And inherent in that question is my warning, which is that there is no um, there is no silver bullet here. None of these lists are going to be perfect. There are going to be pros and cons to each of the way that you could target these. So again, when you're listening to this episode, I want you to think about, hey, which one do I want to become an expert in and target? Because none of them are really going to be easy. And the one, again, that a lot of people think about is, oh, well, if I contact somebody 2 days before their house is about to get foreclosed, of course, they're going to accept my offer or list their house, etc. None of them are that simple, but I am going to cover the most important ones right now. By the way, for any of you that want live answers, like say you listen to this podcast and you want to talk a little bit more about these different strategies, make sure that you jump on my next call by going to www.partnerwithagentinvestor.com. Again, that's www.partnerwithagentinvestor.com. Every week, I cover our agent partnership program. I cover our seller appointment team, how you can get seller appointments from our business, and I answer live questions. So jump on that call, www.partnerwithagentinvestor.com. Okay. So targeted lists, let's jump into it. So each of these lists, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, they all have their pluses and minuses. If you are going to focus on the niche, which is not a bad thing to do, you want to make sure that you are an expert in it, that you're doing it every day, and that you figure out which one you feel like you could put time, effort, and energy into. So let's go through them really quick. The first one is the one I always get asked about, which is pre-foreclosure. So again, the theory is, hey, once somebody gets delinquent on their mortgage, I can reach out to them. They're going to obviously want to do business with me. It's going to be super easy, etc. And again, there are pros and cons to each one of these strategies. So let's talk pre-foreclosure. All right, so it depends on the state that you live in. So I live in Massachusetts, and in Massachusetts, the length of time between somebody falling behind on their mortgage and that property getting auctioned off is between 1.5 and 3 years. If that sounds like a long time, it is. It really is. So in terms of even, knowing who is who, there are 1,000,001 companies that will sell you data when somebody falls behind on their mortgage. Super easy to get. You can Google it. Tons of providers out there that will give you that list. So you buy that list. You typically buy them by county, and it'll show you, hey, these are the people that are behind in their mortgage. One thing that you should understand about people that are behind in their mortgage is that most of them don't want to sell their house. They don't want to sell their house. They don't want to move. They have financial hardship. They don't want to move, and they're behind on their mortgage. Now, because they're behind on their mortgage, it creates a situation where they may have to think about selling. But I will tell you from experience doing this, most of them, when you reach out to them, are not going to want to talk to you, and they're not going to want to sell their house, because that's not what they're thinking about doing. They're thinking about how to save their house. So you buy that list, and you can go back in time. You can say, hey, give me all the people that are a year late on their mortgage. Give me all the people that are, 18 months behind on their mortgage, or give me the people that have auctions coming up, right? So when you're targeting people that are in pre-foreclosure or behind on their mortgage, there's this big gap of time where from the day that they fall behind until they potentially get foreclosed, in many cases, they're trying to keep their house. So one thing to keep in mind with these type of leads is that some of them will go to foreclosure. Like, we have put properties under contract. Seller knows, hey, my property's going to get auctioned off in 2 weeks. We put an offer on their property. They accept it. and then the seller doesn't leave and it gets foreclosed on, and now the bank takes it over. And now all of a sudden they've been in that property for another year after they don't even own the house because now the bank has to evict them. So what you've got to understand with these leads is that not all of them are going to sell. Some of them are going to get auctioned off. Many of them are going to try to figure out a way to stay in the home, whether it's refi or, do a loan modification or borrow some money from somebody. And then the rest of them, certain percentage of them are going to sell. But when they sell, it's going to be totally unknown. So some people, when they first get behind on their mortgage and they're 90 days behind or whatever, they're going to say, geez, I don't think I'm going to be able to keep up on my mortgage. I'll sell my property. And they're, going to sell their home. And obviously, reaching out to those people right in the beginning is going to be the best idea. And there are going to be some people who, at some point between that 90 days and 3 years, are going to make the determination to sell. So why is this important? Well, again, I'll hammer this point home with all of the lists. You have to become an expert in that specific type of list. People that are in pre-foreclosure, they have different needs, wants, desires than somebody who just inherited a home, a probate list, right? Or an expired listing or whatever. They have different needs, different wants. So you have to become an expert. And essentially, you're going to have this database of people that are behind on their mortgage, and you've got to do a good job of staying in communication with all of them. Get in front of them in some way, shape, or form, and then see if you can help them. See what their situation is. See what they're thinking. So you've got to be a resource to these people. I'm going to take a step back for 1 second because we've talked a little bit about getting in touch with these people, staying in front of them, etc. No matter what list you pick, I don't care whether you pick pre-foreclosure, probate, high equity, expires, you have got to figure out a way to get face-to-face with them, or at least on the phone with them. So what does this mean? This means, like every other type of prospecting that you would ever do, you have got to figure out what methods of communication that you're going to use to get in front of these people. So let's just talk through those in the next 2 minutes, just so you understand. Because as you're listening to this, you might realize, hey, I don't want to call or text or door knock or leave a door hanger or mail. I don't want to prospect. Okay, you don't want to prospect, and generating a list like this is not for you. Go back to those prior episodes and figure out which of these strategies is going to make sense for you. Again, with the goal for all of you that are listening, hey, generate 1 or 2 or 3 seller appointments a week. Of course, if you want to generate more, you can. You can do more than that. But with the thought in mind, agent investors are always at their maximum power. They're going to make maximum profits by generating seller appointments. Again, I'll say it again, I'm a broker owner. I've got 400 agents. I'm not telling you to stop working with buyers. I am telling you to focus more of your time, effort, and energy on seller appointment generation. Okay? So how would you get in contact with any of these lists? Well, again, there's only so many methods, right? You've got calling, you've got texting, you've got door knocking, you've got mailers, right? Those are kind of it, right? You could leave door hangers on their door. There's only so many ways to communicate with any of these people. So again, if those things are things that you're like, I won't do that, I can't do that, this episode may not be for you. You might want to go back to prior episodes. But if you're listening and you're like, yeah, I do want to target pre-foreclosures, high equity, I want to drive for dollars, I want to do expireds, etc., great. Continue listening. All right. So we talked a little bit about pre-foreclosures. Let's go to probates. So probates are a little bit different than pre-foreclosures. They're just a different situation. So when somebody, inherits a home, it's a much different situation than a pre-foreclosure because they're typically not living there. In general, probate leads, if you want to call them a lead, are a little bit quicker, right? We talked about pre-foreclosure. Somebody gets late on their mortgage. Typically, they're not wanting to move, or at least not yet. So the lifespan, the life cycle is longer. Could take up to 3 years for something to happen. Right. Well, when somebody passes away and somebody else inherits a home, there's a lot more speed motivation typically because that property is typically empty and somebody's paying real estate taxes on that and they're paying to upkeep it. So there's a lot more sense of urgency there, generally speaking. Now, of course, like every other lead source, there's pluses, there's minuses. I will tell you more than probably any other lead source, one of the biggest negatives of the probates is that people get really mad at you. They do. And if you think about it logically, they just lost a loved one. And the first thing they're getting is a call, a text, an email, a door knock, a letter in the mail about their loved one's property. It brings out a lot of emotions in people. Now, some people can deal with that. Some people are able to deal with it. They don't mind reaching out to people like that. But it is one of those ones that's a little bit, it can be a little bit dicey. You're not trying to do anything bad. You're trying to buy a property. There's nothing wrong with that, but it can be a little bit tricky there. But probates, again, they're not all going to sell, right? There can be plans. Okay, this person passes away, therefore this other family member is going to move in. Or there could be a plan, hey, we're going to list with the realtor. We've been planning on this for a long time. My best friend's a realtor. I already have that lined up. So just like pre-foreclosure, probates are not a guarantee that the person is going to sell. It's not a guarantee that you're going to get an easy in with the person. And you still got to do all the same things, right? You have to pick a way to communicate with them. Are you going to call them? Are you going to email them? Are you going to text them, etc.? These ones in general are a little bit tougher to kind of find who you should be talking to. You can buy probate data. So you can Google it. There's a bunch of providers and they'll give you the person that in theory is the right person to communicate with. But tracking that person down is a little bit harder than a pre-foreclosure where you know where the owner lives. So again, just like with pre-foreclosures, probates have pros, they have cons. Is that an area that you want to specialize in? The other add-on with probates is you may want to start making relationships with probate attorneys. Those can be some great sources for some deals also, right? So when it comes to probates, when it comes to pre-foreclosures, you got to figure out like which one do I want to specialize in? Which one do I want to get to know the needs for? All right. Now let's move on to the next one, which I call high equity. So one thing that we didn't talk about yet with pre-foreclosures and probates is if you're looking for deals to flip, some of those people don't have equity. Now, if you're going to take them as listings, that doesn't really matter, right? So if you contact a pre-foreclosure, it doesn't have enough equity. They have enough equity to sell, but they don't have enough equity to sell to an investor. No big deal. Maybe you just list the house. But if you want to make sure you're getting the most opportunities to buy the property and not just combine and do potentially a listing, high equity might make sense. The thing that we know about high equity is that they've got enough equity to sell to an investor. So how high equity works is you go to these list companies like a list source. That's an example of a company. And you say, hey, I want all the properties in this county or this city or this state or whatever with 50% or more equity. So now, okay, if somebody's house is worth $500,000 and they owe $200,000, well, at least on paper, they could take my offer of $400 or $425, at least on paper. So when you're targeting those lists that if you do get a lead, if you do get somebody on the phone, if you do get a call back from a mailer or whatever, you're talking to somebody who could, in theory, sell their home to you. That's not the case with a probate. always. That's not the case with a pre-foreclosure always. So again, pluses and minuses to all of these. By the way, if you're listening right now and you're getting a little bit confused or overwhelmed with all the different strategies, but you're thinking, okay, I want to learn more, I want to get more involved, jump on my next live call. Go to www.partnerwithagенtinvestor.com. Jump on that call, ask questions. I'm happy to give answers, okay? Live. Okay. Yeah. All right. What are the negatives of high equity? Well, the only thing we know about the high equity list is that they've got enough equity to sell to us. There is no distress indicator. They haven't just inherited a home. They're not behind on their mortgage. There's nothing that really necessarily tells you that they want to sell. However, when you do get one of them to sell, you know that they're able to take a cash offer, at least equity-wise. So again, pros and cons to all of these. All right, let's talk about the next one that I get asked about a lot. Driving for dollars. And for those of you who do not know what driving for dollars is, driving for dollars is when you drive around the areas that you want to buy and list homes, and you look for houses that need work, and then you contact that owner with an offer to buy their house. Driving for dollars gets promoted in a way that I feel is not accurate. There are a lot of online gurus who say, hey, find that beat up property. Of course, that person wants to sell. And well, because their house needs a lot of work, well, of course, they're going to consider a cash offer. Not really so true, right? The reality is that there's not always a correlation between the condition of somebody's house and whether they are willing to consider a cash offer. Now, there can be. I guess if I'm trying to buy a property and I have 2 appointments and I don't know anything else about them, yeah, I would rather the appointment with a seller whose house needs work rather than the appointment with the seller who has a great condition property. However, just because somebody has a house that doesn't need a lot of work doesn't mean that they wouldn't take a cash offer. The other negative about driving for dollars is you don't know what the inside of the house looks like. There are plenty of houses that look pretty good on the outside, but really bad on the inside. And of course, the opposite is also true. Again, some houses you can just tell from the outside, like there's no way this entire house doesn't need a rehab. But, driving around towns, you're not going to see a ton of those. So one negative that I don't love about driving for dollars is that a lot of times people spend a lot of time driving and not a lot of time communicating. Remember, if you're going to pick one of the strategies that we're talking about today, you've got to do the communication piece. So it's really nice to have a list of properties that need a lot of work, but what's your plan to get in touch with those people so that you can get an appointment? Again, whether that's calling or texting or emailing or door knocking or leaving a door hanger or whatever. You've got to spend more time communicating than driving for dollars. So these type of deal finding, seller appointment strategies, this is not a research game. And that's the one thing I don't love about driving for dollars. A lot of people spend and waste a lot of time. They're like getting ready to get ready. And we know in sales, we're all salespeople, that doesn't work. All right, let's talk about the next one. Expireds. I get asked this question all the time. Hey, should I, buy XYZ expired program, hit up all the expireds? Well, if their property, didn't sell on the MLS, of course, they're going to be open to an off-market deal because they want to sell. Maybe sometimes, right? Maybe sometimes. Again, another list that has varying degrees of pluses and minuses. So we know, like if you really think about this, we're in a market, we've been in a market for a while, where the main reason why things don't sell on the MLS is because, think about it in your head, if something's on the market in this low inventory environment that we've been in for quite a while and it hasn't sold, what's the reason it hasn't sold? Price, right? Price. So if you think that you're going to call an expired and you're going to say, hey, your property was on the market for 350, didn't sell. I get a cash offer for 250. Will you take it? And you think it's going to be that easy? You're crazy. Because we know that almost every agent that they've had that they tried to sell that property at 350 already had the discussion. They said, hey, the property's priced too high, reduce it. And in most cases, what happened was that agent couldn't even get a 10K reduction. They couldn't even get a 20K reduction when they might have needed 50 or 60 or 70. So expireds, I'm not saying they're a bad list to call, but like all of the other ones, it's a contact sport. So if your strategy is to call through expireds, make offers on all of them, you're probably going to get in the house, right? It's a good strategy to get into the house. Just be prepared that a lot of those people are going to have pricing expectations that are actually even above retail. So it is kind of hard to get a bunch of cash offer deals done on expireds. But hey, what's the positive of expireds? Well, one thing that we know about expireds that we don't know about all the other things we talked about is an expired at least was really considering selling their house enough to put it on the market. That is not true about pre-foreclosures, probate, high equity, driving for dollars. We have no clue if they've ever thought about selling the property. We do with expireds. That is the primary positive with expireds. We know for the right price, they would sell. What we don't know is the right price in their mind higher than what even retail is, and or will they ever even consider something remotely close to a cash offer? All right, so we've covered a lot of the main strategies to get seller appointments via prospecting, to get fix and flip deals via prospecting, using lists. There are other lists out there. I want to give you some global stuff because, this is all going to apply to any list. I've said this a couple times, but I'll say it again because it's really important. None of these lists are going to be magic. And you've got to figure out your communication strategy and become an expert in the list. Okay. So whatever that list you choose, for whatever reason, you've got to like the pros of it, be okay with the cons of it, and be willing to put blood, sweat, and tears and equity to learn a lot about that list, learn about the needs. And you can do that by doing, right? You make calls, you send letters, you meet people that are in probate or pre-foreclosure. You're going to learn what their concerns are. You're going to get educated. Don't overthink. Jump into it. Start doing every single week, but become an expert in it. It will take time. It will take effort. There are other lists out there. Like I mentioned earlier, like what are we trying to do with this seller appointment and deal finding strategy series? There is nothing more important as a real estate agent than going on face-to-face seller appointments. If you aren't going on 1 or 2 or 3 a week, you have got to figure out a strategy in order to do this, right? That's what the series is all about, right? We know that if you go on a bunch of listing appointments, you're going to get cash deals, you're going to get listings, and that's what we want. That's how we become agent investors if we're not already. That's how we generate those big chunks of income, create a scalable business, have money to invest in passive assets. That is what this is all about. It's not easy. Like, I'm not going to tell you that this is easy, but commit to doing it. Figure out, listen to all of the episodes in this series and figure out like which ones do I think I'd be willing to do. It'll take some trial and error on your part. It's okay to try one and hate it and stop doing it and try another. But don't give up until you're starting to generate seller appointments each and every week. Now, if you want to get sales skills and you want to earn income going on seller appointments every single week, I've got a seller team where I give a minimum of 1 seller appointment per week to everybody that's on my seller team. You do not have to work for my brokerage to be on my seller team. You do have to be a hungry agent to work for my seller team. And you do have to pay me a referral fee for every deal that you close. That's how I make money. But I've talked about this for a while now. My team generates over 100 seller appointments per week. What we do internally is we screen them. We ask them a bunch of questions and we figure out on the phone, what do they really want? Like, are you calling because you like the benefits of a cash offer, but you really want max money? If the answer is yes, we send somebody out on our seller team to meet that person in their living room to give them both options, but knowing that they're going to prefer to list their home. If you want to go on one or more seller appointments per week, guaranteed, even if you don't work for my brokerage, make sure that you jump on my next call at www.partnerwithagentinvestor.com. Again, that's PartnerWithAgentinvestor.com. All right, guys, we will be back. The seller appointment and lead generation deal finding series is not over. We've got one or two probably left, one or two strategies I want to cover. You guys know how to get me. Jump on my next call and I'll answer any questions that you guys have about anything. Thank you for tuning in.